Okay, so about a month ago, I saw a piece of really disgusting news, and basically what it was about was that a bunch of big Hollywood animation studios are colluding together to fix the wages of their animators, and basically they kind of finally got caught doing this. So
And for Katie, who has a BFA in animation, this kind of stings.
yeah, because I mean, I'm looking at this, and long story short, basically what wage fixing is it's what it sounds like. All these companies are secretly conspiring together to make sure that all the employees across the board in all the different companies are kind of paid at the same rate, and they also agree to not try and hire from each other. So say, I get a job at Dreamworks or something, and, it's a good job or whatever, but doesn't pay as much as I want. Well, maybe if Disney really likes my reel, somebody from Disney could come over and say, hey, Dreamworks is only paying you this much, but we could pay you this much because you're a really good animator. But that's not happening right now at all in any of these big studios.
Yeah, it's anti-capitalist too, because it's almost the exact same thing that fast food companies were doing. They were, keeping their employees underneath a certain amount to, I guess, from what I've read in different sources, is to inflate the bottom line. And it's a disgusting practice, because if you go into either the food service industry or the animation industry, wherever these companies are colluding, you're going into basically a dead-end street. There's nowhere to advance.
Yeah, exactly. And the companies, apparently, one of the reasons for this is that, they didn't want the wages overall to rise for the animators, because, if I get recruited from Dreamworks over to Disney and I'm paying more, then maybe, Dreamworks wants to pay me more to come back to them, and then, it continues to rise. But honestly, I feel like that's the way it should work. I mean, that's why wage fixing is illegal, because if you're more talented and you work harder, then you should have the opportunity to
advance and get yeah, exactly. I mean, full disclaimer, I'm an armchair economist. I really don't know what the fuck I'm talking about outside my own experience, but just throwing this out here, my personal experience dictates that there's two fundamentals to free market capitalism. I mean, firstly, companies need to compete against each other to produce the best product for the most affordable prices. Apple first made their first iPhone for $600-$700 launch, and the Droid comes out to compete, and it comes out for let's say $600, and Apple's like, oh shit, fuck you, Droid, we're gonna make a new iPod with more bells and whistles, and it's gonna cost less money, and it goes back and forth until ultimately the consumer wins. The consumer gets the best product for the most reasonable price. Secondly, companies need to compete against each other to get the best employees. That's how you get people out of poverty in capitalistic societies, ideally. I go work at a company, and then I get a better job offer somewhere else. I can come back to the same company I'm working at and say, hey, listen, I got X dollars better benefits or more money somewhere else, and then they kind of start competing over their employees, and the employee wins. And to stifle that in the name of, we got to make sure that we don't outsource all these. They're going to outsource you anyway. You can't compete with fucking slave labor.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I want to elaborate on later too, is the whole outsourcing thing. But something that's really disgusting though is that the emails that that the animators have known about this wage fixing thing for quite a while. I mean, back to the 1980s even is when it first started, but they only now have finally gotten some kind of solid evidence to bring this to the court, which is why it's so important. But some of these emails they found are just oh my god, because the HR
by
people.
I was gonna say by the HR people of all people. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know exactly, but the HR people are emailing back and forth and making jokes even about we're competing, but haha, we have this gentleman's agreement, and it's such a fucking backwards thing to call it the gentleman's agreement.
Yeah,
but
it's an anti-snipe agreement is what it is. We're not going to steal employees from you can't steal from us, because guess what, we're going to pay them the same anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, first of all, as an animator, looking at this situation, it's okay, well, I don't really aspire to try and get a job at one of these big studios. Then
there's nothing to aspire to. You go there, you're gonna be in a dead end street.
Exactly. I could be, if I work really, really, really hard, there's no guarantee that I'm gonna get anywhere with my life. It's I'm always, like you said earlier, it's just a dead end street. But the other thing that's really frustrating about this situation is that some of the companies said, oh, the reason we're doing this is actually a good thing, and the animators should be thanking us because we're keeping their jobs here in America. We're keeping their jobs in-house, because if we had to pay them more and, we were competing with wages and the wages rose for all the animators that were talented, then we would run out of money and we'd have to send everything overseas, and then there wouldn't be any jobs in America for animators, so you should be thankful, and it's just like, oh my God.
There's only a little bit of truth to that. I mean, you just gotta look at how much these fuckers sold Pixar for. And most of it's kind of outlined in the book Creativity, Inc., Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration by Pixar's Ed Catmull. Ironically enough, you don't see the chapter on wage fixing in that book. But he outlines like the beginning of Pixar and how, it basically was traded a lot of hands, and it even was being looked at by like, some car auto manufacturers to do 3D models of their vehicles instead of doing 3D, Disney-esque animations. Mm-hmm. It was originally supported by George Lucas, and then it was eventually bought up by Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs ended up selling Pixar to Disney for, I think, $7.5 billion. Mm-hmm. Whereas George Lucas later sold his entire Lucasfilm to Disney for $4.5 billion. So to say that there's no fucking money to pay the employees is fucking nuts.
I know, exactly. It's like, why don't they, if they sold the company, why don't they then take that money and put it back towards the wages of the animators, the people actually making the movies that made their company worthwhile enough to sell in the first place?
Right, and don't get me wrong, I'm not socialist, I'm not one of these, equal wage type people. Steve Jobs, when he bought Pixar, he had just been recently fired from his own fucking company, Apple. Mm-hmm. From what I read, in different sources and whatnot though, but from what I read, he tried staging a coup in the boardroom, and the boardroom fired him, and they basically, gave him a severance check and said, get the fuck out. So when Steve Jobs was sniffing around Pixar, he was actually looking for a company to compete with Apple again, because he wanted to say, fuck you, Apple, I'm going to make another company that's going to beat the shit out of you. It actually took a lot of convincing, about a year's time worth of convincing, to get Steve Jobs to fund a very early Pixar with his own money. I think it was like $50 million of his own money. So, as far as being like a venture capitalist, I believe he deserves not only recognition and thanks for, keeping Pixar afloat, mm-hmm. But he also deserves something for, selling his shares of Pixar. However, $7.5 billion is a big fucking number. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, even if you were to take maybe 1% and, dish it out to the higher earning employees, I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is.
It honestly reminds me a lot of that fuckwad from, I think it's Papa John's Pizza, the guy who's worth $600 million, has a golf course in his backyard and a 40-car underground garage.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to pay his employees. I think it would cost it would cost entire 2% of his $600 million worth to give all of his employees health care.
Yeah, but see, he needs to take that 2% and get another garage in case he gets another 40
He needs
cars.
to get a 50-car underground garage.
Yeah, exactly. Just in case.
He can put it in there back 9 in his backyard. But see, I mean, I guess there's a point where this has just come down to it's not capitalism, it's corporate greed.
Exactly.
It's corporatism.
Yeah.
It's a few people at the top getting the most money, and they got to keep their little bottom lines so that they can keep their lifestyles and say, you know what, fuck you guys are the drones.
Exactly. And the thing though is that a lot of the reasons I think that this news hasn't really been spread around much, I mean, other than the lack of evidence, is because that, I guess it's not really a threat, but that, it is sort of a threat. That threat of, we'll send the job overseas, that does have some merit to it, because that is a huge problem right now in the animation industry. A lot of the jobs are being sent overseas, and just because it's cheaper. These animators, I feel like a lot of them are like, well, maybe we shouldn't bring this up, because then if we do, they'll just drop us, they'll fire us, and they'll just send our jobs overseas, and then we won't even have a job, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, it's just better to have a low-paying job than no job at all.
That only gets you so far.
Yeah.
To be honest. I think honestly the media blackout has it's partially that, but it's also partially the fact that all of these companies are being indicted in this conspiracy are major parts of conglomerates that own like the majority of the fucking news in this country.
Oh God, yeah. And also Disney
you're not going to see something negative about Disney on the ABC fucking news.
Oh hell no! And Disney also is like notorious for hiring like the biggest and best lawyers to be on their side for everything, and so
yeah, when they go out and they fucking sue a daycare for having like Mickey Mouse painted on the wall or something like that, Jesus Christ, there's nothing more litigious than the mouse. So yeah, someone can go piss on Walt Disney's cryogenic grave. That's a joke, but anyways.
But no, I mean, like, looking at this as an animator, it's like, I feel really stuck about this situation, because it's like, okay, you know, I'm crossing my fingers. I haven't heard any news about it as of this recording, like, you know, where the court's going with it, but I'm hoping that something can be done about this. But I'm like, what could be done? Because, you know, even if the wage fixing stops, there's still that problem with, you know, the actual outsourcing and all of that. And then, you know, so it's like,
when you outsource it to a company or a country that doesn't have the same labor laws that we do, where the currency exchange is much different, where, you know, maybe
you don't have to pay them like benefits and stuff.
Yeah,
either,
yeah.
I assume.
Maybe the cost of living is totally different. You have to pay them healthcare benefits. You just gotta say, you know, here's your money, work.
Exactly.
You can't compete with that. That's an issue. So it's definitely a tricky one, because again, they do have a bit of a point where, you know, if it got too expensive to pay their animators better, they might have to outsource. But we don't know how much more they would have to pay their animators for that to become an issue. I mean, what do they expect their bottom line to be? Again, these people at the top. I mean, if Disney's shelling out a total of like what, $12 billion to Steve Jobs and George Lucas, and they can't afford to pay their animators a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone's getting fucked in the ass, and it's the little guy again.
Yep, it always is. And like, now, I mean, when I'm looking at this, I almost want there to be some kind of, you know, law or something that, you know, well, see, now, and I know that you and I disagree on this, but I mean, like, as an animator, I'm looking at this and it's like, you know, the animator's been fucked over since the 1980s, and this just has not gotten better in any way. And I'm like, it has gotten better. Let me say my idea real quick.
All right, fine, you can be wrong for a second, then I'll correct you.
Okay, good. But no, I mean, like, what I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know anything about how this kind of stuff works, but I'm like, I wish that there was some kind of law where it's like, animation studios have to have a certain percentage of their workforce be in-house, which means in America.
Right.
Because then, no matter what, there'd still be jobs available for animators here, and they wouldn't just get to throw all of the animation overseas because it's cheaper or whatever, and then spend their money on their fucking, you know,
yeah, you're thinking like almost like a tariff on animation.
Oh, what does that mean?
A tariff?
Yeah.
To get something imported, there's a tax. So if a company's gonna have Korea send a bunch of, like, you know, movies our way, then those movies are gonna be taxed up the yin-yang.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, because...
I mean, I don't know if that would work on movies necessarily.
Well, I don't know either. See, I mean, it's like, what kind of solution could there be?
Well, okay, first of all, I'm not... And again, my libertarianism has been kind of waning in some instances like this, where it's like, you know, maybe there should be some federal guidelines, and there's instances where you need force. Again, government, in the Penn sense of the word, is force. Do you force? If you had a gun, would you keep a person from killing you? Absolutely. Would you keep a person from, you know, killing a friend? Absolutely. Would you keep a person from stealing your stuff with a gun? Okay, fine. But would you build a library by holding a gun to someone's head and say, pay me? Probably not. This is kind of a gross oversimplification, obviously, but here's the thing is, according to this, things are getting better. The fact that this has been going on since the 80s, absolutely no problem there, understand that, but now there's concrete evidence that this is happening, and the judge has finally said, no, Disney, no, LucasArts, we're not going to throw this out of the court.
Yeah, because we're
going to pursue this shit.
It has been in the past. There have been judges where, you know, they've tried to bring evidence, but then the judge would dismiss it and say, no, it's not enough evidence. But this time the judge says,
but yes, in this instance, there's enough evidence, and it's going forward.
Yes.
And some of the damage, especially with the internet. Again, the internet is the last bastion of human freedom, in my opinion. There's no mainstream media that can possibly cover this up when it breaks on the net. You're going to have the independents out there who are going to be putting this news out there and saying, oh my god, you know, Disney and LucasArts and Dreamworks and Pixar and all these other companies and Sony are getting indicted in this big wage capping scandal. And you see, what we gotta do is we gotta hit these people where it hurts the most, and that's their wallet. You see, I know, like Katie says, this affects artists, but when you take a look at the bigger picture, what does it mean to the other 99.9999999%? It probably doesn't mean a lot, because the people in this country, our consumers, are so apathetic. They're little kids screaming in their ears, going, "Mommy, I want to see the new Pixar movie." And if you were to try holding your ground, saying, "No, we're going to boycott the Pixar movie because they don't spend enough money on their artists," you might end up caving in because you're just going to want to shut the little fucker up.
Yeah, see, I mean, and that's exactly my point. Is
Right.
that usually I'm totally with you in that I don't really like super strict rules for stuff either. However, in this instance, the thing that normally would maybe fix the problem, which is, hit them in their wallet, the consumers boycott things, or et cetera, not enough people care. Not enough people even know. And if they did, they still wouldn't care. Because it's like, oh yeah, the animators, oh, that's too bad, whatever, I'm still gonna fucking go see Bambi 10 or whatever,
But no, I think that it's not necessarily like, I don't know, I don't think it's something that we need necessarily a law for. I think it's just something that the public attitude needs to change. And I know this is a big order, and a lot of people don't want to change because, as a culture, we're so addicted to our cheap shit and our diversions that we don't want to think about the consequences for our own economy. We don't want to think about the fact that, these jobs are being shipped overseas just to pad a select few's bottom line. I mean, there is a rising minority of people who are thinking, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
But it needs to be something so more widespread where people are like, enough people say, no, I'm not going to watch the new fucking Pixar movie. You guys fucked over, X many people out of their jobs. You refuse to pay your people. You have no even capitalistic sense. You're not giving people what they earn.
Yeah, but I mean, to ask the American public to have that kind of mindset, I mean, I honestly do not see that happening at all.
The consumers are too apathetic to do anything because they want their cheap shit and they want their diversions.
Well, also, another thing, unfortunately, about in American culture at least, animation is still seen as kid stuff. So
you're right. It's seen as a genre and not a medium.
Exactly. So people hear about animators, getting screwed over in their jobs. They're like, oh, they just make cartoons for a living. They should go get a real job. You fucking drive a truck, make a shoe.
I remember listening to a Stan Lee interview, and he said that back in like the 70s, he was invited to this big party when he was doing comic books and stuff, and people would ask him what he does, and he's, oh, I write.
Yeah.
And people would keep on pushing, what do you write? And he's like, I write comic books, and they'd start leaving.
Yeah, it's...
So there's always a stigma about adults creating things that are considered kid stuff.
Yeah, which
luckily that is shifting though. I mean, you do see a lot more adult entertainment out there. Adult entertainment. You see that too in certain Japanese properties.
Yeah, but it's just really frustrating to see all of this, and I mean, I guess all we're gonna have to do is just kind of wait and see what the court does with this case and see if maybe the animators can come out on top, or at least maybe spread the news about this. I mean, and that's kind of why I brought this topic up, is because maybe if the mainstream people aren't going to be broadcasting it, at least we can kind of spread it around on the net and get some people to know about it.
Hopefully we drum up some, I don't want to say we drum up outrage. I want to say we provide some information. Maybe somebody didn't know this was happening.
Exactly.
And now they do. Maybe and they can be like, oh, it doesn't. I don't really give a shit. I want to go watch Frozen 6 or whatever. And or maybe it does matter to you, and you're like, this isn't right. And maybe you could even write Disney and say, hey, listen, I'm going to boycott your stuff unless you fix your fucking act.
Or even better, any animators out there listening, you can be like, you know what, fuck those big studios. I don't want to work for them. I don't want to be just, one head out of 20 million people sitting in the studio all day. I'm going to make my own shit. I'm going to be independent, or I'm going to, fund my own studio. And
United Artists.
Exactly, and make my own things and just... not have to, because you don't have to wait. You don't have, I thought that when I was a teenager. I was like, I'm going to have to wait until I'm in a big studio to learn how to animate. You don't. If you have an idea and you want to do it, you should go for it. And, honestly, me looking at these big studios is just one more reason when I'm like, you know what? I definitely am just gonna be an independent animator. I don't even want to try and aim for that shit, you know? Just
Right.
make your own stuff and just try and avoid this crap. And if you do make your own company, don't make these same mistakes and don't be a fucking asshole like this.
Well, and that's the trick too. Is back in the early years of Hollywood, the studios and the publishers started to collude, and that kind of inspired Charlie Chaplin, for one, to form United Artists, a more independent studio where it was less about maybe necessarily the bottom line, but more about artistic vision. Hence United Artists.
Yeah.
I think that this is also the next way, like you, that this is how animators can rise up above this, possibly. I mean, granted, I just had a brilliant idea. I mean, there's Kickstarter. I mean, of all the fucking things, you could have crowdfunding. You could have the people pay for exactly what they want, as long as your pitch is good enough. But in this day and age, I especially with the crowdfunding and the digital distribution, I can't imagine that publishing means as much as it used to. Because again, I mean, obviously back before the internet, if you had to go through a publisher, otherwise your movie would never get seen in a theater, unless you wanted to do the indie tour thing, and then even then it was kind of spotty. But here, I mean, people can pay you directly for what you're offering, and you can give it to them directly too. You don't have to send it to a movie theater. You can just deliver it right to their hard drive or to their smart television. But it's the only way you're going to get around this whole entire studio mess, because again, people, I believe the best way, again, is to hit the studio's wallets, but people are apathetic. People really don't give a shit. As long as they get what they want, they get their little diversions, they're fine. There's no way you're going to be able to incite enough people to say, hey, this is sick and I'm not going to support it, and things will get done. I mean, believe me, I love the internet, because despite all the drama and the rhetoric and the utterly juvenile behavior occurring in most debates, it's still the most valuable tool we have to get information to the masses. I mean, you don't have to be holier than thou, you don't have to be a condescending prat about your cause, but you can get information out there so people can make more informed choices. And you can give your products out there so people can make their own choice about what they want to get, instead of being snow shoveled the shit that comes to theaters.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I hope that you guys take away from this is, maybe next time you're thinking about going to see that new Pixar film, maybe check out some independent film on Kickstarter instead, and put some money towards that. Support somebody who actually maybe needs the help, instead of just giving more money to these studios.
Right, yeah, you find someone who's chasing their own vision, and maybe with enough people coming together, a couple of small animators could grow into something bigger, and maybe they could become a competitive entity in the world of animation.
Yeah, exactly.
So fuck Pixar.